Okay, welcome back to Low Tech Garage. Today, we're going to be tackling the high idle issue we have with the XJS. Now, as some of you already know, we have a 1996 XJS. It's the 6-cylinder and it's the Celebration Edition. Beautiful car, but one of the issues that's been troubling us is that it has a consistently high idle. So it basically hangs out when it's in neutral at around 1100 RPM, which is extremely high. But the biggest issue that we run into is when you put it in drive, it will literally ever so slowly accelerate all the way up to about 50 miles an hour. It'll even shift gears on its way up. And also when you're driving along, if you left off the throttle, it won't engine brake. It'll almost just coast and stay at whatever speed you're going at. So we had already looked for vacuum leaks. We know that's a common problem that can cause high idle. There were no vacuum leaks to be found. We found like a little split in one hose, repaired that. No improvement there. We cleaned the throttle body. We'd done some research and found that sometimes the throttle body can cause that. When we put it all back, we had the same issue. So finally, we resorted to taking it to a British car specialist, with the thought that sometimes the throttle position sensor can actually fall out of calibration, and they had the specific auto logic computer that you need to plug in and talk to these ECMs. And basically, we just got the car back and still the same issue. Obviously, we were a little bit frustrated that a specialist couldn't even diagnose what caused this high idle. We were feeling a little bit defeated. So actually James dove in and did some further research and found a random Facebook post that pointed us a new direction that we honestly had completely spaced on until just then, but it makes a lot of sense and we're kind of optimistic that this might do it. And that would be this little guy right here. This is the idle air control valve. So this is basically specific to the US spec emissions cars, and from what we understand, this could very well be our culprit. So I'm gonna walk you around why we think this may actually be it. And I know what you're thinking. It's like, how did we not think of the idle air valve when we have an idle issue? We don't really know, but hey, the Jag specialist didn't think of it either. Now, a little later in the video, we're gonna reinstall this on the car so you'll see exactly where it mounts. Obviously, we've already removed this thing to do the cleaning on it, but basically it mounts into the throttle body and just has 2 bolts. So right here, you can see all of this crazy carbon buildup that we've got going on right here on this plunger. And that is common because of the EGR, or exhaust gas recirculation things, that the US spec cars have. So what they're saying is that this buildup could basically be causing it not to seal properly, and obviously that could lead to air getting past where it's not supposed to and causing a high idle. Another interesting thing that we noticed is this O-ring right here. You can see it has carbon buildup outside of the sealing surface. So right here on this side, it's clean, but around here, you can see where it almost looks burned. And it also looks like it may have potentially been pinched as well. So we're gonna probably replace this O-ring just for good measure. And we had even talked about, if that didn't fix it, potentially putting a little sealant, because this goes up against like an aluminum surface on the throttle body. So potentially that could be a backup plan as well. So the process is going to be very simple. We're basically just going to use like brake parts cleaner to clean this metal plunger here. That's going to be priority 1. And then basically we'll probably clean the little shaft as you're in there. And then we'll look at replacing this O-ring, and that's it. So hopefully once we get that back to a nice shiny surface that makes a good connection inside of there, that should get us a properly functioning idle air valve, which hopefully will resolve our idle issue. All right, we're going to give this thing a quick clean. Already you can start to see how much is coming off of there. The stuff on the shaft is to be expected. I mean, that was just a thin film of, carbon, but it's just how thick it is on that point. And the parts cleaner takes it right off. And there we go. I'd say we have a very nice result. So basically, yeah, we cleaned all the carbon off of the shaft, and most importantly, the cone-shaped piece here, which is what actually seats into the valve. We also cleaned this flange, and now we're going to put a new O-ring on there. So we conveniently have this absolutely mega set of O-rings, and basically, we found one that seats very nicely on there, and is also just a little bit thicker than the one that came off as well, just to give it a better chance of actually sealing in the groove once we put it back on. And for reference, if you need a size reference of which one we used, this guy right here, so 115, and I think you guys can pause to read that if that helps as well. Other than just putting a little mineral oil or maybe a little Vaseline on that O-ring just to make sure it seats properly, it's basically done. So we're gonna get it back to the Jag and basically put it in place and see if it changes anything. So now we're back with the car. We're actually gonna clean out the little valve that it sits in, just get the carbon out of there since we can reach it now, and I'll show you where that is. And that would be right here. So this is your throttle body, and basically this little guy right here. You got your two pieces of hardware right here holding it on, and we're just cleaning out the inside of it. A little bit of brake clean and a little rag, simple as that. So we're actually also using a toothbrush in here just to kind of get the some of the more firmly held on stuff out of there. Didn't wipe off quite as easy as it did on the valve, so this is just being extra thorough. Look at that. So as you can see, we have a significant improvement now. So basically that little beveled surface down at the bottom there is where the plunger actually seats. So that's where you want to pay most attention, really try and get that as clean as possible. And yeah, I think we're ready to put this thing back in. So the great news is our new O-ring snapped into place real nicely. It felt like it seated properly, a lot better than the old one. So the two bolts that went with this are 5.5 mil, but you'll notice he's actually using a screwdriver, and that's because on our one, you can see how tight the space that he's working with is. The previous owner or some shop that worked on this basically cut a small slot into the head of that and basically made it so you could just get a screwdriver in there, which is kind of a nice touch. So we're just getting the last of it buttoned up. We've just nipped that back down with a wrench. We went as tight as we could with the one with the screwdriver. On your end, if you don't have that convenient little slot in your screw, you may need to use like a ring spanner or something like that to get underneath and onto that bolt. We're honestly not sure because thankfully someone had that slot there. But without further ado, it's time for the first test. All right, let's see what we got. Wow, definitely runs different. That's already a lower idle. We are at about 800 RPM, where normally we would be at about 1100 right now.
Let's turn the AC off.
Yep, I'm gonna turn off the AC. So it looks like we have success. We've just done a very preliminary test drive, but once it came down off of its cold circuit, the revs did in fact drop down to where in neutral it idles at about 700, in gear right about 600, which is kind of what you want. The runaway throttle issue that it had, where basically you could just lift your foot off the brake and it would accelerate away, is now gone, and it drives like a normal car again, which is fantastic. So we're gonna take it up on the highway, test it out and see if it continues to behave. We just put a little gas in there, but so far, looks good. And it is so much nicer of a car to drive now.
Yeah, big improvement.
And to think, we were quoted $1,300 that this thing needed a new ECU, and you know, that was even then just a question mark as to whether or not it would fix it. And instead, a little bit of brake clean and you know, a shop cloth, and here we are. Oh, and a new O-ring, you know. I know those add up. All right, she is driving great. This is a lovely car too. Now that we've got the short shifting issue fixed as well, which was just a plug on the underside of the throttle body working its way loose, it just drives amazingly. I mean, this thing has been fantastic. And of course, the brakes are good too. So this just goes to show that if you have the notorious XJS high idle issue, that your first step should always definitely be to clean the throttle body and the idle air controller. That's definitely going to be the first things that you're going to want to do. And of course, if those don't do it, you could always look at the ECU, and maybe that throttle position sensor issue could be your issue, but it's nice to be able to check something that you can do yourself. It's just a small number of bolts, a little bit of cleaning, and if you do both those things, there's a good chance it could fix your idle issue. So this is definitely a win. If this helped you out, please leave a comment, let us know. If you've got some more trouble and this isn't working for you, shoot us a message in the comments. We'll see if we can help you out. And of course, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We've got more Jag content coming on the way with both this car and with the XJR, so definitely consider subscribing and hitting that little bell icon too so you get notified when we release a new video. But we'll catch you on the next one.